6 months or more in the year 2000. And a resourceful FBI agent in Phoenix, Arizona, wanted to follow up on suspicions about foreign-born students who were honing their skills at American flight schools. But officials at the FBI headquarters shut them down. With this report, it is time to look ahead, to focus on our 19 recommendations, and to continue to the implementation of the necessary and important reforms of the intelligence community, and to enhance the federal government's partnership with state and local law enforcement and other first responders. If the recommendations in this report are heeded by the White House, the agencies, and the Congress, we should be able to make significant strides in improving our homeland security. In my view, it is regrettable that it has taken more than 7 months for the intelligence agencies to declassify the portions of the report that we are releasing today. I remain deeply disturbed by the amount of material that has been censored from this report. Our concerns about excessive secrecy, both during the joint inquiry and in the 7 months since, is reflected in recommendation number 15. This recommendation calls upon the President, executive agencies, and the Congress to review the current classification system and to make it more realistic, especially given the need of state and local first responders for real-time intelligence information. The 7 month review that our report has undergone has delayed our ability to begin implementing many of these reforms. It has cost us considerable momentum for legislative reform. I am committed to seeing that this report is not forgotten, overlooked, and filed on the shelf. With other members of the Joint Committee, I intend to file legislation to implement those recommendations that require action by Congress. We must act to honor the victims of September 11th. I now recognize my friend and colleague, Congressman Porter Goss.
Thank you, Bob, very much. Thank you all for being here. This is indeed an important day. We've done an awful lot of work and spent a lot of time. And in some ways, the irony of that strikes me. I was thinking on the way over here, as much as we've done, and with as great a staff as we have had, led by Eleanor Hill, a staff that was originally pretty well made up by people picked by Brett Snyder from the community, and he did an excellent job of getting the staff up and running, and then Rick Cincagrana made it work for a while till Eleanor came in. We've been very fortunate. We've gone through all those documents and all those places and talked to all those people, and you couldn't have 4 better members of the United States Congress to work with, or 3 other colleagues to work with, as far as I'm concerned. We've had a great go at this, and it is historic that we've done it in a bicameral and a bipartisan way. The irony is this. I can tell you right now that I don't know exactly how the plot was hatched on 9/11. I don't know the where, the when, and the why, and the who in every instance. I know a lot more than I did. But we still can't fill in a lot of the blanks. That's after 2 years of trying. And we will someday have the documents to exploit. We will have the people to interrogate. We will have ways to get more information to put the rest of the piece of this puzzle on the table. But right now, we don't have it. Obviously, both the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee are heavily engaged in these matters. The fact is, we are fully engaged in a war on terror. And the war on terror has many, many faces and many places, it seems to be. And one of those places happens to be the continental United States, which is a big shock to all of us, I know. I think that when you take a look at this document, which is Bob properly held up as a big, heavy document, there's a lot of good material in here. There's some that isn't. You have to remember we are at war, and there are some actionable items still being pursued by the appropriate authorities. And you also have to understand that there are people watching this press conference who are going to read this book, who are going to analyze what information we've put out and what we haven't put out. And the last thing we want to do in any way is create an opportunity for a terrorist to take advantage of us because of something we put in our good intentions to have our public know what exactly happened, but nevertheless aiding and abetting a plan that would allow somebody to end-run our capabilities and do damage to Americans at home or abroad. So that's been a difficult task for us to handle and for the administration to handle. I think we've got the balance about right now. If you open the report, you will find there's a couple of blank pages. Those pages will not be blank forever. As soon as the actions that are necessary to deal with those issues are completed, those pages will be filled out. The record is not lost. It's in a classified section of our respective committees. It's a question of when is the proper time to release that information. So I think we're going to get there. This is an excellent snapshot. It's not a full anatomy. It doesn't tell you everything you want to know, but it tells you a lot, and it tells us some places we have to go, and it tells us some things we have to do differently. Now, the good news is we did not wait until today to start taking those steps, nor did the United States government or the executive branch. The legislative hearings have already started on what I call sufficiency. Why didn't we have all the information we needed to have? Where were the problems? What do we need to do different? How do we have to tailor our capabilities to fit the threat as it truly exists? All of those issues are ongoing. They're in hand. The agencies that are involved in this, our frontline agencies, have changed a great many things, still have more to do to be sure, and will require a lot of close oversight. I think that challenge is understood. I think the United States Congress is up to that.
I think all of you, if you haven't, you will go through this report more than once, more than twice, and I recommend all of you do it. There's a lot of stuff in here, but there's a lot of information that's not in here that should be, in my judgment. But we did the best we could. We tried to declassify more of it, bring it home to you, because you would take it to the American people and to the world, because we'll learn from this, I hope. The Joint Committee's task is finished, but the work to implement some of the recommendations, I hope, has only begun, because they're monumental feats to accomplish. The question is, will these recommendations be followed through? I hope so. But if it's like things in the past, not much will happen. But I believe now, since September the 11th, there's been such a wake-up call in America, and for the right reason, that the American people are going to demand changes. To sum up my judgment, my personal judgment is this, from what's in the report and what's not in the report that a lot of us have been privy to. I believe if all of the information had been put together before September the 11th in some type of central area, a fusion center, where it was analyzed and disseminated, coming from various parts of the world, first the alerts, a lot of signal traffic, and then, for example, the Phoenix memo, the San Diego reference that Senator Graham made, the Moussaoui case in Minnesota, the alert FBI agents. And you put that together, and if it were fused and acted upon, maybe things would have changed. We don't know that. This is hindsight. But we learn from the past, and if we don't learn, it'll certainly be repeated. I hope this will be a learning lesson for all of our agencies. But I think the basic tenet that we learned is a lack of coordination and sharing of information, different cultures in the community of intelligence. We've done our job, and now we've got to do more legislatively, and the people who run the intelligence community have got to do theirs.
It was a privilege to join Chairman Goss, Chairman Graham at the time, Chairman Graham, and now Chairman Shelby, and the members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees for the critical effort to improve our intelligence capabilities in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. I was pleased to work on the joint inquiry with people of such patriotism and such commitment. I want to join my colleagues in thanking and recognizing the excellent work of Eleanor Hill, our staff director. She and Rick Cincagrana gave tirelessly of themselves, not only on the investigation, but on the declassification process that turned out to be a significant challenge in its own right. I, too, want to join Mr. Goss in thanking Britt Snyder for the work he did in assembling the excellent staff. Always on our minds during the inquiry was our responsibility to the families of those who perished at 9/11. We are privileged to have some of the families here with us today. We have said over and over again during the inquiry that anything touching on the events of September 11th is hallowed ground to be treated with the utmost respect. This inquiry is not about assigning blame for 9/11. It is about better protecting the American people in the future. The inquiry was conducted with that uppermost in our minds. The report discharges our responsibilities as fully as we were able to do. Our work started with the recognition of a sobering fact. Al-Qaida was better at planning the attacks and keeping their plans secret than the United States government was in uncovering them. The findings were released last December, and they in detail deficiencies the performance of our intelligence agencies. They failed to share information. They failed to ensure that techniques for collection and analysis were of the highest standard, and they failed to focus appropriately on the possibility that foreign-based terrorists would attack the United States. The joint inquiry made recommendations last December that were intended to address these fundamental problems, and I trust that the intelligence committees are monitoring the implementation of those recommendations. The unclassified report we are releasing today provides a better understanding of the basis for those judgments. As good as the joint inquiry and the reports are, they are not as complete as they could be. We repeatedly encountered obstacles in getting necessary information from the administration. For example, and I think this is very important, we were never able to get much of the material we requested from the National Security Council, specifically the records of the Counterterrorism Working Group and written exchanges between the National Security Council and the intelligence community on counterterrorism proposals. The nation was not well served by the administration's failure to provide this critical information to the committees. If the independent 9/11 Commission is not given access to these materials, its work will also be incomplete. Lack of access to the National Security Council information is not in our nation's interest. In addition, the administration's failure to cooperate fully with the joint inquiry showed an unwillingness to exhaust every effort to discover information that might assist in better protecting the American people. Even the joint inquiry's success in uncovering information in the files of the FBI dealing with the activities of the hijackers in the United States that had been previously known by senior Bureau officials did not encourage the administration to be more responsive to requests for access to records and other documents. Equally disappointing was the process of declassifying the report. The joint inquiry took 9 months to do its work. It took nearly that long, or over 6 months, to negotiate an unclassified version of the report with the administration. This was about 6 months too long. Much more of the report could have been declassified without any impact on national security. This is especially true with respect to references to sources of foreign support for hijackers. And while I may have a difference in degree with Mr. Goss, I want to say without his leadership, we would not have had the declassification that we have. Thank you, Chairman Goss. Time and time again, this administration keeps information classified rather than making it public. Classification certainly must protect sources and methods, but it should not be used to protect reputations. This is at odds with the enormity of the tragedy we suffered on September 11th and the necessity of doing everything we can to make it less likely that we would experience events like those again. I am proud of the work of the joint inquiry. Better cooperation from the administration, however, would have enabled us to do a more thorough job for the American people. Thank you.
Questions?
You've got a series of eight. Ours are procedural. I don't mind missing votes.
Senator Shelby and I have been notified that there is a vote underway in the Senate. We are going to leave to make that vote and return as quickly as possible, and I'll turn the podium over to Congressman Goss and Congresswoman Pelosi. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That would get out of here.
Ms. Pelosi and I apparently also have 8 votes on now, too. It's a busy day on the Hill. Be very happy to take any questions you might have for either of us or anything about the report. I understand you had a walkthrough from Eleanor Hill, 11 pages of document. If you haven't looked at that, you should. It's help you with the report. I think that the decisions that were made were all rational decisions, and I am satisfied that each decision to hold a fact back at this time was based on a reasonable presentation by the administration. I do think they will be released. I think that there is a timeliness about certain events that are going on. Certainly ongoing investigations would fall in that area. And I don't think that there is abuse of the classification process in this final report. The question of need to overhaul the declassification process is undeniable. I mean, Ms. Pelosi is exactly right. We found just layer after layer after layer of obstacle. There was not people trying to throw things in our way. It's the culture of not releasing information in the community. And you've got people at the working level whose instructions are this is not to be released. Then you take it to the decision level and say, we think that the arguments are that this should be released. And we won a good number of those because of the very diligent persuasive powers of Ms. Hill, who basically was able to point out there were other ways to say things and protect sources and methods, protect investigations, and protect foreign relationships, which are the problems. But we way overclassify in the government. We have for years, and that is one of the areas we clearly have to pay attention. And in fact, we've already made some statements about following up on Senator Moynihan's good work to deal with the question of classification and declassification.
Mr. Chairman.
Answer that.
Please talk to the cameras.
Okay, I'll talk to the cameras. This gentleman has the question. I'm going to do my best to be polite to you and polite to them and get my face in the right place and my answer in the right place. And, oh, absolutely. That's very... Well, there are a lot of areas that we did not go. There are a whole lot of areas. We didn't get into non-intelligence areas. There are whole kinds of regulatory agencies that are now in DHS and in other organizations where they definitely need to go. And in addition, as I said, our work is a snapshot up to the time we finished our investigation. There have been more things happening since then. There will be more things happening in the future. I think we are going to be hand-holding the developments for a long time on this. This is a huge piece of our history. It is critical that we get it as right as we can. And I'd be willing to bet that we're going to be doing this for a couple of decades.
I'd like to speak to the independent commission issue because I was one of the people who initiated such a commission even as this joint inquiry was getting started. It was absolutely essential for us to have an independent 9/11 commission where innovative thinking was brought to bear, where it was not within the institution, which was an important inquiry. That ours was significant and important and historic. This is now even more important because it will spring from the work of this commission, and I hope that in the classified version that the members of the commission will fully avail themselves of this information. And I call upon the administration to cooperate fully with the 9/11 Commission. One of the reasons I used fairly stern words about the National Security Council today is because I had not seen that cooperation coming forth. And I think that's very, very important. It's important for us to know what the communication is within our own government and what information was there. Again, not to assign blame, but to figure out if we should revamp how we communicate with each other in order to protect the American people. And a lot of hopes are pinned on this 9/11 Commission. It would never have come to be without the insistence of the families. They were the most effective and eloquent advocates for it. Their hopes are pinned on it as well, and the fact is it was still a struggle with the administration. So I think that the time is running out on the Commission because of getting a late start for one reason or another, but I think the focus now has to be there, and as the distinguished chairman said, with a broader brief than what this Commission had.
Senator Schumer says that the administration is coddling Saudi Arabia by keeping information about Saudi Arabia out of this report, protecting them. Is that true?
I know that there is some mention in the press on certain countries, and I know that there is some treatment of the question of foreign support. The document will have to speak for itself on that. The classified material that we have is, I think, as complete as it can be on that, and the measure of the judgment of anybody who asks a question like that has to have both the classified and the unclassified to understand the whole story. I believe this is an area that there will be more information coming in the future, but at the moment, I do not think the whole story is out there.
Now, this gentleman over here.
Follow up to this.
You both said that a lot of this has come out in the past, in your previous report, in your open hearings, leaks to the press, what have you. Could you sum up in a nutshell what each of you can tell us is in this 900 pages today that the public will learn for the first time?
I think that's a good question for Eleanor Hill, because we've both had access to the classified and unclassified versions, and I think that probably is something safer to hear from her, as I know you were briefed by Ms. Hill earlier today.
Let me add one more thing in response to the previous question, if I could. I think it's helpful. The Joint Inquiry is turning over all its material, classified and unclassified. The Commission will have that material. That's not going to be a problem. Additionally, I understand somebody made reference earlier to some national security. I think it was Ms. Pelosi. My understanding, I've been working with both Mr. Hamilton and Governor Kane, and my understanding is that they have gotten some of that national security information they have sought. I don't know if they have it all, but I think that the narrow parameters that we focused on have been broadened very definitely, and certainly everything we have as a foundation is available, and certainly that will lead to more questions, as will the stuff that is coming through the door today, because every day something new happens in this.
Ms. Pelosi, can you respond to the question about Saudi Arabia? Chairman Goss responded to it. I don't believe you did.
I associate myself with the remarks of Chairman Goss in that regard. We really can't speak to that issue. But I do want to say one thing that I think I thought maybe you might ask about, and that is this. After 9/11, the American people had the impression, and I think that perhaps the Bureau of the Intelligence Agencies may have given this impression, that these were loners, people acting alone in different parts of our community, not communicating with other people, and then when they got the signal, they all acted. What we have learned in our investigation of the Joint Inquiry, and one of its great values, is that was simply not the case. There are people in this country giving help, comfort, and financial support to the hijackers. And what's important for the future, and Senator Graham has said this over and over again, is where are those people? Are they still out there? We have to have the very best intelligence and the best communication among intelligence agencies. We have to have accountability internally in the intelligence agencies, and we have to have accountability up to higher authority in our government from those agencies as well. Because that impression at the start of these loners, and now they're gone, was in fact not the case. And it's still not the case.
Ms. Goss, I'd like to follow up and then to ask a separate question. Follow up regarding Saudi Arabia. In recommendation 19, you talk about the possibility of foreign governments providing assistance or involved in terrorist activity. Does that actually mean you've identified more than one country?
Let me put it this way. As Ms. Pelosi has just said, we are very concerned about any support for terrorists, whether they're abroad or in the domestic continental United States, Alaska, Hawaii. But our problem has been our intelligence capabilities have always been focused overseas on foreign intelligence. Turns out some of the problem has been right here in our homeland. And we have not had the capabilities we need because Americans don't spy on Americans. It's a free, democratic, open society. Thank the Lord. We're going to keep it that way. But we sometimes have to figure out then how to take care of people who are abusing our hospitality, taking advantage of us. Now, are those people being sponsored by other organizations that are terrorist organizations? The answer is yes. Senator Graham has been extremely diligent and extremely accurate on that subject. He has pointed out a number of times that there are other organizations and that there are specific activities unaccounted for. And they very well may be in the domestic United States, which is a very urgent threat for us. And one of the reasons why you have to stay in your seat on your airplane when you fly into Nashville, and one of the reasons why you have to throw a magnetometer to come into this building and walk around through all the barricades and so forth. Those kinds of defensive steps are being taken as well as the offensive steps to get the information. I can't tell you whether the next terrorist act in the United States that is going to happen, which I pray we frustrate and disrupt before it happens, is going to be state-sponsored and run from afar, state-sponsored and run through an embassy, state-sponsored and run by a local front group, state-sponsored and run by a business, or an individual group of operations who just have an ideological desire to go out and make trouble today. I don't know that, but we have to protect against all of them. So when you ask me the question, have we taken into account foreign-sponsored terrorism, the answer is yes, we have. Is there more to be done on that? The answer is clearly a great deal more, particularly as foreign-sponsored terrorism can be manifest in our country.
As a follow-up, is that specifically then why in Recommendation 3 you mentioned Hezbollah and Hamas? Is that why specifically in your Recommendation 3 you mentioned Hezbollah and Hamas? Is this linked?
I think that would be a fair conclusion for you to draw.
The report spent a lot of time focusing on the activities in San Diego and raises the conclusion that if that effort had been put together more thoroughly, that was the best chance to have unraveled this investigation. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, who dropped the ball in San Diego when there were so many people that seemed to be involved with al-Qaida connections that were supposedly known to the FBI and yet were not tracked?
Well, let me first say that on September 10th, the attitude on these things was a whole lot different than it was on September 12th. That's part of it. There is a cultural question there. The second issue, I think, is a very important one, is we've already identified, and the report is replete with a number of deficiencies in the community. Communications, coordination, stovepiping, all of those things we've talked about. They're all there in greatly enumerated. The problem that you have in asking me the question, or the problem I have in answering your question, is if we'd put this all together, could we have stopped it? Was this our best chance? The answer is right now, yeah, that would have been the best chance on what we know now. But I suspect that when we know more, that there will have been other places that we could have done a lot better. And it may very well be the answer to your question is, oh my gosh, there was a much simpler key to this. We didn't know that until just now. I couldn't rule that out.
If I may just respond to that as well, because being a Californian, I had special concerns about San Diego because we proudly are home base to many military installations, bases, ports, etc. I thought that it would be important for there to be special attention paid to force protection of our men and women in uniform who are present in the San Diego area. And so this dropping of the ball, well, I think it was a mistake, because these were not cryptic things. These were a couple of things that should have been more apparent to the intelligence agencies. These were leads that were not adequately pursued. And in one case, and again, I hesitate because I'm not sure what we're at liberty to talk about. In one case, the agent dropped the pursuit of the individual because he was from a country that was not considered an unfriendly country. So that was the end of that. Another case related to that was related to it, not in San Diego, but calling out of San Diego, was a case where the person said he just didn't want to talk. And that was sort of the end of that. So it wasn't just about not connecting the dots. It was about what was the caliber of investigation and pursuit of some of these people. And in some cases, it was a question of not connecting the dots. I think San Diego looms large as a place where we could use it as a case study on how our intelligence can be gathered, analyzed, and disseminated more effectively to protect the American people.
I've got to clean up an answer I gave you. I'm advised by staff that an inference could be...
Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yeah, on Hamas, on Hezbollah and Hamas, directly linking to 9/11. No, can't go there.
Based on the findings in the report, question for all the participants, do you believe that the FBI, with the changes made by Director Mueller, is capable of doing the kind of domestic intelligence collecting you're saying needs to be done better here, or do you think a new agency needs to be, or a new structure needs to be set up?
The answer I would give you is the answer that the committee made, which is we are going to take a run with the FBI for a year and see how they do.
Go ahead. I spent a couple of hours at the Bureau 2 days ago with the director, and a lot of plans that they have in mind, a lot of things they're trying to do in the aftermath of September the 11th. At this point in time, I think we should give Director Mueller an opportunity to change a lot of things that need to be changed at the FBI. I think he's on the right road, but the road is only beginning, and we don't know where the journey will lead.
Could I just add a few thoughts to that? I agree that we're in the midst of a process. Step one was to give the FBI, as it is currently configured, those tools and procedures and personnel necessary for them to carry out intelligence in the domestic scene at a level of professionalism that Americans deserve. We will be evaluating how well that reformed FBI functions with the question in mind, are the problems that this report identifies about the FBI the result of specific acts of inadequacy, or are they more basic to the culture of the FBI and its ability to carry out domestic intelligence? We also, as part of this step, call upon the administration and the Congress to answer this basic question. What do we want in terms of domestic intelligence? Are we prepared to go substantially beyond the current responsibilities of the FBI, or do we think those are too expansive? While we do these two things concurrently, challenge the FBI to function at a higher level with its current mission, at the same time we answer the question, is the current mission what we want the future mission to be? Then we'll be in a position to answer the final question, should we retain the FBI or look for some other alternative, either among an existing agency or among a newly created agency?
I've got to add just a little to Senator Graham's answer there. We're asking the FBI, we're calling on them to change their mission, in a sense, a mission from where they were federal police, which in a sense they still are, a hybrid situation down the street, to a domestic intelligence agency with the power of arrest too, as you well know. We've got to see how it works. It's going to be telling and soon. Sure.
Lists an intelligence report from 1998 that says that there were plots proceeding successfully to hijack planes, and that some bin Laden operatives had successfully gotten through airport security at a New York airport in a dry run. What sort of response should that have provoked?
Well, I think you'll see throughout this report, and probably other things to come, that there were more than one or two instances that should have brought the bells ringing in our intelligence community, the FBI, the CIA, the whole community, but didn't. Maybe this was one of them that you referenced.
Our jurisdiction was the role of the intelligence community in the events leading up to September the 11th and thereafter. The National Commission has a broader jurisdiction. They will start with this report as the beginnings of their review of the intelligence agencies. They will begin at ground zero in their review of the non-intelligence agencies, such as the FAA. My own response to your question would be that if there was evidence that airplanes which had previously been the subject of hijackings, but in the vast majority of the instances were being hijacked for economic or political purposes, were now going to be used themselves as weapons of mass destruction. That information should have been communicated to the FAA. The FAA should have made judgments as to whether the standards by which airline crews were trained what to do in the event of a hijacking readjusted to reflect this new reality. But those will all be questions to be asked of by and for the National Commission.
Senator, could I ask a question about the redactions? I'm the brother of a September 11th victim at the World Trade Center. And one of the more offensive things that has occurred since 9/11 is the exploitation of this tragedy as an excuse, if you will, to invade other countries, to invade Iraq, to plan on future invasions. And the reason that that happens, I believe, is because there's this vacuum where there isn't information. And when I look at all of the things that are crossed out or not involved in this, that sort of gives me pause and makes me think that there's still a vacuum where anything can be suggested about anyone. So my question is, do you think that this document will be enough to put an end to all of these unsupported allegations or suspicions about other countries that were responsible for 9/11, or is there still work to be done on that?
Well, I don't think this will put an end to a lot of things because information intelligence gathering is ongoing. It's evolving as we stand here or sit here today. That's the nature of the thing. But I don't believe just by itself the events of September the 11th caused us to invade Iraq. I personally think that's sound public policy, foreign policy by the Bush administration. And I regret what happened deeply. I know a lot of the survivors, you know, and have worked with them, want to continue to work with them of the events of September the 11th. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the United States or perhaps anywhere.
Senator, with all that's come out before the hearings and so on, could you say what is going today?
Well, I think an item that I referred to in my opening comments, that we had for the better part of 3 years a standing capability in the vicinity of Afghanistan to take down Osama bin Laden if we had ever had actionable intelligence that identified where he was or would be with sufficient lead time to be able to launch against him. I was unaware of that fact until it was disclosed in the course of our hearing.
Why weren't we ever able to get intelligence on actual from CIA?
Well, fundamentally, going back to the Cold War, we substantially reduced our human intelligence. Part of the reason for that was that the Soviet Union was a very difficult place to penetrate, and when it was penetrated, we lost a lot of people, a euphemism for meaning that they were executed. And we substituted sophisticated technology, particularly satellite imagery and various forms of signal intelligence. Those worked reasonably well against a big target like the Soviet Union. They do not work very well against small mobile targets like al-Qaida. So one of our recommendations, and I might say that Senator Shelby was a particular advocate of this, has been to build up our human intelligence so we can be more equipped to get spies inside these organizations precisely so we can better know their capabilities and intentions in time to do something about it.
Thanks. Condoleezza Rice made a statement after the event that it was entirely outside the box to have expected that planes would be used as weapons. And I'm wondering if within your investigation you found indications that that al-Qaida itself had used planes as weapons in the past, that the intelligence agency had made preparations to protect the president at different points from this, and that there were exercises at the Pentagon, for instance. Did you unearth anything in terms of being able to anticipate that sort of an attack?
I think most of us know that it was not totally outside the box. I guess it depends on how you're looking at it at the moment. It was unusual, but some of us have learned, and you have too, that airplanes were discussed as weapons back in the 90s sometime and so forth. So it shouldn't have been a shock to anybody that the people would take airplanes and make them weapons of mass destruction, or at least local destruction.
Preparations were made in relation to it, in terms of intelligence or defense capability here?
I'll leave that.
Excuse me, I've got to be parochial and recognize Bill Adair.
Senator Shelby and Senator Graham, could you talk about whether you think the administration's unwillingness to declassify materials was an effort to protect the reputations of people in the administration?
I think it had several motivations. One was to protect the country or countries cited in that section of the report that were providing direct assistance to some of the hijackers. Second, internally, to protect the reputation of agencies and individuals. And third, to preclude the American people from being able to ask a series of questions which started from the premise, here's what we know happened before September the 11th. What have we done since September the 11th with that information in order to reduce the chances of a repetition of September the 11th?
If I can follow up on your question, I had the benefit of esteemed counsel here. The answer is no. Thank you.
What's next for Congress? For example, cutting aid off to certain governments, notably Saudi Arabia and other governments that may seem to sponsor terrorists, or change the relationship between America and those countries?
I can't answer your hypothetical question. I am not in a position to take a detour to the federal penitentiary. I don't believe Senator Shelby is interested in doing that either.
We better get to the next question.
But the next step is going to be to convert these recommendations, which call for congressional action, into legislation, to introduce it, advocate its adoption. Senator Shelby has a committee hearing to chair at 3 o'clock, so this will have to be the last question.
There are a lot of competing demands on resources as we know it right now. It's appropriation season. We've recommended that we have a lot more human intelligence on the ground. How much more human intelligence, and how much would it cost?
Well, since I'm an appropriator on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, I'm going to tell you it's going to cost a lot of money, but we have put a lot of money, extra money, and I won't say what, into the intelligence community since September the 11th. Senator Graham, when I was chairman of the committee, he was vice chairman. When he was chairman and I was vice chairman, we pushed for a number of years the issue of human intelligence, which we both deeply believe in and which there was a shortcoming. And I think we're going down the right road that way, but whatever it costs, it's cheap compared to what will happen if we don't do our job. Folks, I got to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good, Dick.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob.
meeting with you about it.
We'll take a meeting to discuss that.
There was no report, but also a report.
About what happened prior to September 11th. If there is any significance, it indicates that we were not trying to provide to play the role in September 11th or other plans or actions before September 11th.
The FBI and CIA and company have had these recommendations since December. What kind of grade would you give them so far in implementing?
I would say the FBI has done a very credible job, particularly implementing those reforms that are to put us into a position to try to better evaluate whether the FBI can perform the function of domestic intelligence. There's a significant number of people who feel that the FBI is so culturally oriented to those techniques that are associated with law enforcement that it is unable to make the transition to also be an intelligence agency. I think we'll have a period of time now to retest the FBI.
Sounds like they're on probation.
I don't know if I'd use that word towards the FBI, but they are they're in testing.
Okay, Senator, there's going to have more to say at 3:30 back over on 418.
Thank you, sir.
Quick meeting.
418 roughly.
And if you'd like to read that report on U.S. intelligence before